Hello, this is James King's Comics and Entertainment. As a Richmond, BC resident who has grown up shopping at both sides of the border, I am shocked when the federal government has imposed a 25% surtax on all goods, grocery, non-grocery, and gas, when returning home from US at the Canadian border, if staying less than 24 hours. Is this going to keep going until January 20th, 2029, when Donald Trump finally finishes his second term for good? I'm not waiting 4 years. It just feels like 2020 again, when our border was completely shut in order to prevent the spread of the virus during COVID. I'm a Canadian that absolutely resents Donald Trump for what he has done to us and the rest of the world. Nobody will benefit from Trump's tariffs, neither us nor American businesses, as not everything can be made in the US of A, and they still need to rely on imports from other countries, as proven in Trump's first term. If you put tariffs on this country, then okay, I'll move somewhere else. It's just not financially realistic for these factories to pay everyone 17 or 18 bucks an hour. I also disagree with the idea of Canada becoming the US's 51st state, or BC being the US's 63rd state, if every province and territory became a state, due to the US policies mostly benefiting the ultra-rich and reduced welfare protection to lower-income citizens, as well as the lack of universal health care and the low likelihood of protection to bilingualism and indigenous culture if these two countries were merged as one. Canada and US have always been very good friends, and I don't see any benefits in making any changes to the strong, long-lasting friendship. You may also be curious about my view on the US as a whole, even after all the atrocious things Donald Trump did. I have no problem with the country and most of its 330 million citizens. I have no problem going there at all, as well as supporting their businesses. The only thing I have a problem with is the federal government's diplomatic policies and how they favor billionaires over the working class. Considering the US is a democratic country and Washington state, where most of my family's shopping is done, is a pro-democratic blue state, I don't really see why I have to either like or dislike both Bellingham and the MAGA movement at the same time. Is it wrong for me to cheer after getting $4.99 Costco chicken or gas at $4 a gallon while booing tariff news on TV and convincing one of my friend's mom to get a different brand of EVs other than Tesla? Without a doubt, the biggest victims of the 25% surtax at the border are border businesses and us Canadian shoppers. Well, if we happen to have a lower cost of living than the US, then the US will be the victims instead of us. But anyways, these US border businesses did nothing wrong. Their businesses don't deserve to go bankrupt, and the kids don't deserve to have nothing on the dinner table because Trudeau is greedy and wants to punish his own citizens with a 25% surtax over wanting to save up on gas and avoid the profiteering that has always been there in our food supply, from poultry to dairy. For this whole time, Trudeau's target should have been Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, Pete Hegseth, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and other officials, as well as other billionaires supporting the MAGA campaign, and not hard-working Canadian citizens that have always done their dues and paid their fair share of income and property taxes to keep our community thriving. Like, is something wrong with Canadian groceries? Is the quality really bad or something? Do American gas just last longer? Drive better whenever we put them in our cars or something? Well, due to a lack of refinery capacity and strict environmental protocols on refinery operation, BC gets most of its gas from Washington state anyway. So why don't I just get gas firsthand at a cheaper price instead of getting them secondhand, resold, when it's not that friendly towards my wallet? They're the same thing anyway. Just because I get them at a gas station 45 minutes drive away, I need to pay a 25% tax to you? What type of nonsense is that? But we're stuck in a dilemma. Gas is too expensive, but EVs are also too expensive. And look at those imported cheese prices here. Do you want to know why it costs so much here, but you can get them at much less down the border. Our government charges a whopping 270% tariffs on imported dairy. Imagine I'm from another country and I want to sell cheese from a home country in Canada. They only cost $3 a block and I want to sell them for maybe $5. Guess what? I have to pay $8.10 in tariffs. Now I have to sell for $13 instead of $5 if I still want to profit from the cheese. And what about local dairy? Are they a lot friendlier for my bank account? These farmers have the right to sell them at whatever price they want, right? They can be as greedy as they want. But they're just business people. All they care about is making money. But what about our government? Like, what does this show? It shows that they don't care if we have any financially friendly options in the supermarket. Local, expensive, imported, even more expensive. And that's not including the irreversibly high inflation we have been suffering since COVID. Once the prices go up, they will never go back down. But the US is different. They subsidize their local farmers, so these farmers don't have to worry about raising the prices really high to earn a bigger profit. And they don't have 270% tariffs on imported dairy. That's why every time I go to the States, I go to Costco and see if there's any imported European cheese on sale. If there are, I'm snagging it at a fraction of the price I would get in Canada. Just next time, Mr. Liberal Party, please do some research on the reasons why we need to get gas and groceries down there. It's not because the Stars and Stripes flag is cool, but rather just some normal societal problems like the ones above. And we're trying to help you address them. As Canadians, just because we want to save up by shopping down the border, doesn't mean we want Canadian stores and businesses to suffer. But if Canadian businesses want to make good use of this opportunity and use shop at Canadian stores as a gimmick to boost business, there's one thing they should keep in mind. Our demand for goods in these stores are elastic. If they cost more, we buy less. If they cost less, we buy more. It's just my demand is maybe more on the elastic side compared to the ones who have always been shopping local prior to Trump's new tariffs. But more importantly, I strongly suggest the Canadian government to either lower carbon tax or change its supply management system to ensure more affordable options on the shelves in my local real Canadian superstore. Going back to the 270% tariffs that our federal government charges on imported dairy, the reason why our country has been doing such a thing is because of supply management. In order to prevent dairy farmers from overproducing, the government charges heavy tariffs on imported dairy after a small quota, with the goal of limiting competition with Canadian dairy, as well as agreeing on a high price floor and setting quotas on how much dairy products Canadian dairy farmers can produce each year. But the problem is, this was a policy that was made and designed for, drum roll, the 1960s. Canada's population as a country back then was just 20 million. Given how our population has already doubled since and inflation being so high in recent years, it's time to say that this supply management system we started having like 60 years ago is obsolete. We have no affordable dairy and poultry options in grocery stores right now. While the US has an oversupply of dairy, some lower-income Canadian consumers are forced to look for dairy alternatives due to high prices for both local and imported dairy. The end result, dairy alternatives benefit while local dairy farms suffer in reputation for profiteering. And customers buy less of them due to Canadian dairy's high price floors and inflation. And US dairy farms have no way to solve their oversupply problems, thus making food waste for the environment. Keeping this system in today's society, especially when we are still recovering from a global pandemic, is a lose-lose for both countries. As a Canadian consumer myself, The supply management system gives me the impression that Canada only cares about its farmers, but not its consumers. We are getting fleeced either way. While our demand for dairy may not be very elastic, our demand for dairy from a certain source still is. Whichever source sells it for less, we get more. Whichever source sells more, we get less. Other than the lack of affordable grocery and gas options, as well as the inability to properly pinpoint Trump's regime, another key reason why I am strongly against the idea of a 25% surtax at the Canadian border is because of the past trauma I had from the COVID-19 pandemic, which I am still in the process of recovering. It wasn't that long ago when many Canadian citizens like me had to endure 2 whole years of trauma, where the Canada-US land border was either completely shut for non-essential travel, or we had to pay profiteering PCR labs $300 for a simple test on the way home. P.S. We may get locked out for 4 years now. Many businesses relying on customers from the other side of the border have shut down for good, or are currently still in the process of recovering from those losses. As for me, while my family doesn't run a restaurant in Blaine, White Rock, or Point Roberts, I was still able to feel the pains as our only option to get around Richmond was gas that cost almost $8 a gallon. And do you remember the BC flood in November 2021? Our federal government didn't give us any compensatory options in terms of dairy, as local dairy farmers had to dump their milk due to there being no way to transport them on land before they went bad. And if other countries wanted to help us out during that hard time, they still had to pay 270% in tariffs regardless. Why do we as citizens or as businesses want to experience the damage to our wallets again just 3 years after lifting the requirement to pay $300 for a PCR test upon returning to Canada? Plus, having the privilege to travel is not a guarantee. What about the ones living in North Korea or Afghanistan? When their government-owned businesses choose to profiteer, they will not have any cheaper alternatives. They will be stuck going for low-quality food and necessities that cost a large chunk of their income for the rest of their lives or whenever the regimes get overthrown, resulting in a very low quality of life. Think twice before your privilege to shop down the border and safely come back in a few hours no longer exists. Please don't take it for granted, okay? It's not as fun as you think.